What's up, guys? Welcome to the first look here on Roto Grinders. I am your host for today, Britt Devine. I'm joined today by my two co-hosts, Chris Beermakers fan Prince. He of the ESPN Outside the Lines notoriety, and you see his face all over those FanDuel commercials. And I'm joined by Paul Arrington. He is known as Boggs Light around the industry. Chris, we're going to start with you. How's it going? How was your week 3 for NFL?
Week 3 had its ups, its downs. I mean, a lot of injuries. I had a lot of Danny Woodhead, so that didn't help. So, I mean, that's a DFS week. So that's what happens. Some good, some bad. Week 4, we turned the page. I want to say congrats to Paul there on his new gig with Aces. So we'll get into that. But real happy for you, buddy. Sounds awesome. And ready to talk some Week 4, man.
Yeah, Paul, on that note, why don't you tell everyone about, I saw on the forums today about your new role over at Fantasy Aces. We were talking about it before the show. Why don't you tell all the viewers what you're going to be doing over there?
Sure. Well, I'll start off by saying after last week, it's about the only good thing that's happened to me this week. But, yeah, excited to be working for those guys. I've been a big fan of what they've been doing all along. It seemed like a perfect fit. They're located here in Southern California. And they're looking to really kind of hammer NHL as an offering to the fans, and obviously, in addition to football and baseball, hockey is something I'm going to be bringing to the table over there. If you guys are hockey fans, look out for an announcement in the next week here or so. But yeah, it's just it's an exciting time to be in this industry. I'm grateful for the opportunity. Had a lot of fun in the first couple days I've been there, and I'm looking forward to the future with them.
Yeah, it looks like I used to work for Fan Throwdown back in the time, not too long ago. And I got to say, the situation you're in is probably looking a little bit better than the situation I was in there. Fantasy Aces looks like they're up and coming, so I wish you all the best, my man. And I'm glad that I'm not going to have to be playing against you on Fantasy Aces anymore. Beer, we've got about 12 games on the schedule today, maybe 13. We're going to give everyone their first look. This is the first of 5 hours of shows for Roto Grinders. There's a show Thursday, a show Friday. I think there's 2 shows Sunday as well. We've got college football talk coming up this weekend. We might even have some soccer talk. So, Beer, let's jump right into the first game here on Thursday. We've got the Giants going into Washington. Last Thursday's game, we saw some fireworks with the Falcons at home. Basically, if you didn't use the Falcons last week, you lost your games. You think that is anyone going to want to use these Washington or the Giants players this week for Thursday?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Washington looked great last week, came up short, but Cousins definitely stepped in and looked good, so I think he's viable again against New York. Alfred Morris, steady as they go. I mean, nothing exciting, nothing flashy, but he's always in play, less of a play on PPR sites, but he's an option. The receiver, Garcon, I think, is locked in with Cousins. So the 1 week where he came in, he didn't give him any targets. That was an anomaly. Deshaun Jackson looked good. Niles Pauls looked good. So this could be one of them games where there's a lot of scoring in the game. So I would focus mostly on Cousins and Garcon if I was playing. You guys know by now, for years, I don't touch these games. I stay away from them. But I think you could see some offense here, especially through the passing game of the Redskins.
So what I'm kind of concerned with in this game, not so much the Washington side. I love your Garcon pick. I'm going to be all over Garcon probably in these Thursday games. With Jackson being maybe somewhat limited, I do like Garcon a little bit. Do you think Cousins can have a huge game like he did last week?
I don't think you're going to see the same type of numbers, but I think Cousins is going to be a guy similar to Foles. Should get you about 300 yards a week. So I don't think you're going to see 427 again, but definitely a good matchup for him. So, again, Cousins, Garcon, that would be the combo I'd be looking to if I was playing these games.
Niles Davis at all, what's your thoughts on him? He's been pretty productive since he's taken over for the other tight end there.
Yeah, he's been solid. So, I mean, he's a guy. He's, there's guys I like better if I was playing these games in that price range. Kelsey, maybe even go up to an Olsen or a Bennett. So he's on the radar, but again, I'd be focusing on Garcon and Cousins.
I might be having some Garcon exposure in my Thursday games, and that brings me over to you, Boggs. Let's talk about this Giants team here. I saw some talk from the Giants coach about limiting Rashard Jennings due to his heavy workload on Sunday and the quick turnaround here. Do you think he's a viable option, or are you going to be scared off of him for these Thursday games?
Well, to answer your question, simply no. I think the Giants really kind of, laid it out, gave everything they could last week, but I think this week you'll see them, especially in a short turnaround, kind of go back to the Giants we saw in the first 2 weeks. Rashad Jennings had a terrific game last week, but he's up against a Washington defense that has been surprisingly stout versus the run this year. So I don't really see anything that I'm really liking from this game. I think Washington's defense, after 3 weeks, they had a couple cupcake matchups, but I think they're the real deal. They got a few guys healthy, especially in that front seven, that can seriously get to the quarterback, which is going to be trouble for Eli Manning. And then even if Rashad Jennings, gets the lion's share of the carries like we've been seeing, I think that Washington has the capability to shut him down. So I'm not really liking anything from the Giants end this week. Perhaps maybe the kicker, if you're playing on a site that has one.
Any interest in any of these Giants wide receivers, or maybe even Eli Manning? I can't believe I said it. I believe someone on Washington in their secondary just got hurt for pretty much the rest of the season. It was already atrocious. Now it's even worse. Maybe in a GPP, if you're playing one of these Thursday GPPs. Any interest in Eli or Cruz or Randall Rubin or even Larry Donnell?
Probably the only guy that I would maybe take a flyer on is Donnell, just because he's so cheap still across the industry. But I just still think there are a lot of even more consistent options that have a lot more upside this week than trying to take a risk on Eli Manning, who, like I said, I think the Giants are going to come out for this game like they did the first 2 games, which they were inept offensively all around. So I'm not liking it. I understand that there's potential there with a pretty mediocre at best secondary for the Redskins, but especially now that there might be some weather concerns in that game, it might be nice, really raining, windy. I'm just not liking a whole lot, especially from this Giants team, but in general, just not liking a lot from this game.
What you know about the weather? Even Kevin Roth, our meteorologist here, not even he knows what's going on 4 days from now. What's on your
tomorrow
for the radar? Oh yeah, good. You know what? I take that back there. I'm stupid. That's end of subject on that one, guys. So I'm right with you. I'm not really eyeing much on this Giants game. I will say, Rashad Jennings, guys, be careful. That Washington defense, the front of it, is looking for real. They are looking pretty good. With the coach saying he might get a little bit of a reduced workload, I'm going to be shying away from Jennings in the Thursday games. Beer, let's go to this Green Bay at Chicago game. You don't get to talk about your Packers. Boy, did they screw me last week, Beer. So we're going to talk about the Bears and maybe how the Bears can beat up on your Packers this week to get some revenge for me. Who are you liking in the Packers at Chicago this week?
I'd rather talk about the Bears after that performance in Detroit, so I'm glad I don't have to go there. But for the Bears, the thing is, I know there's a lot of people high on Cutler. I like Cutler, but he's had some issues with Green Bay. If you look past his last couple starts against them, only averaging about 167 yards through the air a game, a lot of interceptions. And Green Bay's pass D has actually been pretty good. Geno got off to a good start. Other than that, they held Stafford in check pretty much, caused some turnovers. So I don't know that I'd be running out to get Cutler. I think there's other options in that range. But I do love a Martellus Bennett at 6,000, one of my favorite tight ends of the week. And Forte, of course, one of the top 2-3 running backs this week. FanDuel, DraftKings, does not matter. The guy's a stud, getting targeted all over the field. So he'd be my top play from the Bears. I think obviously the kicker's in play. If we talk kickers, yada, 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 whatever. Keep an eye on Marshall. He's interesting. If he's a little banged up, I think you could get him at a pretty good ownership. People will be scared away because of the injury and because he burned a lot of people last week. Jeffrey could be a play here as well, as he could step into that main role and be the main receiver. So I think it's going to be, we thought last week we were going to get fireworks with Chicago or Detroit and Green Bay. I think you will see that this week. Just temper expectations a bit on Cutler and his turnovers.
I will say the Packers are the 5th worst in terms of giving up points to halfbacks. That's bad for the Packers, good for Matt Forte. Love me some Matt Forte this week. I think you're right on spot with Cutler. and some of the receivers. Keep your eye on Marshall, guys. If he's at all limited in practice on Thursday and Friday, just a little tweak in game could have him sitting out again. I'm not going to be risking Marshall at all in this game. Maybe use some Alshon Jeffrey instead, but I'm loving Matt Forte. And real quick, before we get to Boggs, what's your take on Eddie Lacy this week? He's faced enormous, tough defenses, and I want you to weigh in real quick on Lacy because he is very tempting on DraftKings this week.
Yeah, I love Lacy this week. I think you're going to see a breakout this week. It's coming. People are down on him. The coach is down on him. Let's look at who he's faced. Detroit is potentially a top 3 run D as of right now. They look very good. Who else has he faced? The Jets, one of the best run Ds out there. And Seattle, the best overall D in the league. So those are the 3 defenses he's had to face. So the fumbles have been an issue. But again, I think this is a great spot. Chicago, the worst team against the run last year. Not so good again this year. They're in the bottom 5 again. I think they're going to feed Lacy the ball. I think you're going to get a breakout here. He is a steal on DraftKings this week. I think he's under 6K. Even on FanDuel at 8,000, you're getting a discount. So great play this week. I think he busts out in a big way.
Read somewhere he's only getting about 2/3 of the snaps this year compared to last year where he got about 75% of them. Does that sway you off at all this week?
No, I mean I think you're going to see some Starks, but I think they're going to want to get Lacy. Lacy is a cornerstone of this team's future. They're not just going to write him off, throw him on the bench, and be done with him for James Starks and DeJuan Harris. So you're going to see him. He's going to get carries. Going to have a good day. Easily pay off these salaries.
Boggs, let's get to the rest of the Green Bay guys, and I want to hear your take on Lacy as well too. Aaron Rodgers, Jordy Nelson, they did us dirty last week. Are they going to come back this week against the Bears?
Well, I sure hope so. Otherwise, old Beer Makers fan, he might be in trouble. But the problem I have with this game is I can't figure out whether, both teams are going to ground and pound and it's going to be a low-scoring game or if this game's going to turn into a shootout. Both offenses, Green Bay is very consistent, in terms of the pass and the run. But Chicago, this is an offense that really, is focused on the pass first. That being said, both defenses, I think have been mediocre up to this point. But in terms of the pass especially, I think that there's potential for this game to go either way. I don't really see either team jumping out to a massive lead. So for me in my cash games, I don't really have to have anyone, believe it or not, despite the extreme potential in this game. I'm just having a hard time pegging what type of game this is going to be. That being said, I do think Lacy at his price is pretty tempting. I might have to roll him out in your cash games because I do agree with Beer Makers fan that tough three games to start the year, but he gets a cupcake matchup against a Bears D that this is not your daddy's Bears D anymore. So I expect him to come out with a vengeance, be running hard. I do like him at that price, especially on DraftKings. But again, for me, with in terms of Rodgers, Nelson, and Randall Cobb, they're obviously in play for me, but I don't think I have to have them in my cash games like I did last week, especially after the performance they had. So for me, Lacy at that price on DraftKings, sure, roll him out in your cash games because I do expect him to be heavily involved. Either way, even if they're able to get a lead or even if they're playing from behind. But for me, I just in terms of the passing game, that's the question mark for me. So I don't have to have Rodgers. Don't have to have even Jordy Nelson, even though his price has come down. It's just it's a little tough for me to figure out right now at this point in time.
Yeah, on DraftKings, Eddie Lacy's 5,600. He's the 16th highest priced running back on their site. Let me just toss a couple other names out here. Ahmad Bradshaw's 5,800. Alfred Morris is 5,500. Out of all those guys, maybe those are kind of guys right around the price range. If you had to pick one of those guys, Bradshaw, Lacy, Alfred Morris, which guy would you pick to be in your cash game lineup?
To be honest, I'd probably take Lacy, given the matchup, because we said the Giants are, surprisingly sneaky good defense, especially that front seven. So I do like Lacy at that price. There are some other value options, even cheaper, that I would even be willing to play in cash games. But among those three, it's going to be Lacy for me. I just really think he's the guy that is the best running back of that three, and he has the best matchup. So that's the route I'm going.
Yeah, Lacy's going to be in your 50-50s, probably 50% plus own on DraftKings this week, just with his price and his matchup guys. In GPPs, just want to throw it out there, maybe fade him. He's going to be 25-30% owned, maybe even higher in your GPPs. And we've seen it takes quite a lot of guys that are 5-10% owned or less to kind of win these GPPs these first couple of weeks. So in your GPPs, we'll have a couple of them in there, but the majority of mine I think are going to be without Lacy. Let's move on to the next game here. We've got the Bills at Texans here. We've got revenge for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Are you aboard with me there, Beer?
No. I've thought about it. I mean, he's been all right. You look at the numbers.
Let me preface it by this. If Arian Foster is out, would you have any faith in Fitzpatrick?
I would actually like him better if Foster is in, believe it or not. It gives him more. They just sit back on the pass. And Alfred Blue was okay, but he's not scaring anybody like Arian Foster would. So Fitzpatrick's a guy. He's a name. You get what you pay for. So there is a little bit of upside there. But these are two defensive-minded teams. So I think you're going to see more of a slugfest, more of a game on the ground. I know Buffalo's definitely going to want to slow the game down and run the ball, in my opinion. So Fitzpatrick, to me, nothing more than a deep, deep, deep flyer in a GPP. I'm not going there personally, but I guess I can see the merits. Alfred Blue, okay, he's a guy. If the price is right, okay. The guy I like in this game, believe it or not, and I don't like Fitzpatrick, I like DeAndre Hopkins a whole lot here based on price. And you can see the changing of the guard here. Andre Johnson is still viable, still a great player. But to me, Hopkins is starting to come into his own. And if you didn't see the catch he made, it didn't count. But if you didn't see that catch, please go and look it up because it's one of the best catches you'll ever see in your life. I promise you that. So to me, he's this year's Josh Gordon, Alshon Jeffrey. He has that type of breakout ability. And I think you're going to start seeing it week in, week out. He's probably the only play from Houston that I'd be looking at in this game. If Foster's out, obviously Blue again, a cheap play at running back. Other than that, too many tight ends. The defense is a possibility as well against E.J. Manuel on the road. So Hopkins, for me, is really the only guy I'm looking at with the defense.
Yeah, I like the Hopkins. I watched that game. It's very clear he's pretty much taken over the number one spot in that offense at receiver. I like your comparison to Alshon Jeffrey. He's definitely going to be one of the big breakout stars this year at receiver. I'm going to be have some GPP exposure to Hopkins for sure. And the Texans D-Beer, real quick, any interest in them against the Bills?
Yeah, again, I think Manuel's going to, he's going to struggle on the road. So again, they're going to run the ball a lot, so could cause a few turnovers. Houston, I think, is overrated on defense, if you ask me, but still probably a top 10 play. Near the bottom of that 10, though. There's a lot of teams I'd rather have. The San Diegos. Shout out to my boy Boggs there. Miami. So there's some other defenses I'd rather have, but they're certainly in play against Buffalo on the road.
Speaking of Boggs, let's get to the Bills here, Boggs. And there's pretty much only two plays I have in this game. I feel pretty much only one in cash games I feel comfortable with, and that's Fred Jackson. He really lit it up last week. He did what I thought he was going to kind of do the first couple of weeks. He's going to be a PPR machine. He's going to get the goal line carries. I like me some Fred Jackson, maybe some C.J. Spiller, and in GPP some Sammy Watkins. But outside of that, I don't see much going on this Bills team.
Yeah, I think that if this game isn't the lowest over-under total of this weekend, it ought to be. Because this clock's going to be moving the entire time this game. You got two teams that are run first, both two decent defenses, two below-average quarterbacks, and just not a whole lot of scoring, in my opinion, from this game. I might disagree with you a little bit. I don't hate Fred Jackson this week, but we've seen from time to time over the course of the last couple seasons that if C.J. Spiller is able to get some space, he's the guy that really has that really home run hitting type of play. And I know he's obviously significantly more expensive than Fred Jackson, and he had a mediocre week last week. But this Houston defense can get beat up on the run, and I think that having a guy like Spiller in there to really kind of check down to is, and with various wide receivers, or I'm sorry, running back screens, I think he's the guy I want, but it's going to be only in GPPs. I think that if you're looking for an interesting pivot off of Eddie Lacy, who we just got done talking about, because you think he's going to be highly owned, I think you take Spiller in a tough matchup because he's got the home run hitting, potential. I think he's going to be a little bit more involved than he was last week because he's more explosive. But that's my take. I can't really trust Fred Jackson, but his price is very tempting, and we saw what Rashad Jennings did. So. I'm sorry. Was that last week against Houston?
Oh, yeah. You don't beat Houston through the air. You beat them by just pounding the ball right in the middle of them.
Yeah, we saw what Rashad Jennings did. So I think there's potential, and there's certainly merit for Fred Jackson. But again, not a guy I have to have in my lineups this week. May surprise you, but just not a guy I have to have in my lineups. But either way, I'm not targeting either quarterback in this game. I would focus on the running backs. For me, I'm really only kind of leaning C.J. Spiller from the Bills in GPPs, and don't really have to have any of the defenses this week. I just don't see a lot of turnover potential aside from a fumble or a special teams touchdown because there's just not going to be a lot of passes thrown, in my opinion.
Yep. All about these Bills running backs. The Texans have given up the 10th most fantasy points to halfbacks this season, so I will be targeting them throughout some of my games this week. Let's move to the Titans at the Colts here. One of you gets to talk about Andrew Luck and Bradshaw, and the other one doesn't really get to talk about anybody because I don't really see anyone on this Titans team I want to play. Let's start with the Colts here. Andrew Luck, he's expensive. He's the only quarterback this year that's pretty much been elite. You can kind of trust him. Do you trust him this week at home against the Titans, Beer?
Oh, yeah. I don't think you're going to see what you saw last week. It seems like whatever you expect something from the Colts, you get something else. Last week we expected more running, pound the ball, Richardson, Bradshaw, and you got Andrew Luck going crazy through the air. Games you expect Luck to go crazy through the air, they want to run the ball 75 times like against Philadelphia. So I like Luck. I like some other guys a little bit better, but at home, in a good matchup, you got to think they're going to easily handle Tennessee. So he's in play. The price has gone up, though. So on FanDuel, I believe he's the most expensive quarterback, if I'm not mistaken, at 9,800. So a little pricey, but, again, a good matchup. The running back situation, I'm not touching Richardson till he shows me a little bit more. Bradshaw's the superior player there. He's cheaper. He's more involved in the passing game. He's definitely in play. The receivers, difficult to handicap them as well. Wayne's probably a safer play on a DraftKings where he's going to get 4, 5, 6 catches. Keep an eye on Hilton. If he's out, can he increase the value on Akeem Nicks? And Dante Moncrief is a name to keep in mind as a rookie from Ole Miss has looked really good in his opportunities. Looks like the old Akeem Nicks, tall, athletic, when Nicks actually had some talent back in New York. Obviously not looking like the same guy here. Tight ends are dicey as well. I like Dwayne Allen over Fleener. Kicker's in play, and I think the defense is in play. So pretty much Indy's a team you can look to if you're torn between this guy and that guy. Look to a Bradshaw. Look to Dwayne Allen. I think Indy's in a good spot this week, and it should easily handle Tennessee.
Yeah, the problem with all the receivers is Andrew Luck spreads it around so much. You just have no clue who the touchdowns are going to, who the receptions are. The only two people I'm going to trust in this game are going to be Andrew Luck and Ahmad Bradshaw, where he's cheap. I was over on Draft Day earlier today, if any of you guys are over there. He is very cheap still over there for a halfback. He's probably going to make some of my lineups over there this week. Boggs, I don't know if you want to talk about the Titans. There's some talk that Jake Locker might not even play. Charlie Whitehurst, no thanks, Jeff, on that. I won't be using him. I have no one in play for the Titans at all that I can even remotely trust this week.
Well, if Locker does in fact sit due to injury, I think that Charlie Whitehurst wouldn't be a terrible punt. He certainly would be better than Shaun Hill, especially since he knows this system. He was the backup for the last couple of years in San Diego. Obviously not a world beater by any means, but the Colts defense, they've been getting beat up, especially through the air. So if I'm not really on Locker just because of his inconsistencies, but if he does sit, I think at a minimum price in a GPP, Charlie Whitehurst could provide some, a sneaky play. That being said, I can't trust any of the running backs. I don't know which receivers are going to be targeted the most. Really the only guy that's been consistent all season long is Delaney Walker, and he's banged up too. So I'm not liking much from this game in general. How many times are we going to recommend Justin Hunter before he does anything fantasy relevant? So I'm kind of jumping slowly off that train. There's just nothing to love in this offense because of its inconsistencies, and I'm not even perhaps the kicker again for me from Tennessee, and that's just not even something that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm just avoiding the whole situation. If anyone was on locker, guys, just make sure you check the injury report. It's looking like it's going to be 50-50 right now. Just no way to tell what's going on with him. Let's move to the next game here. Panthers at Ravens. We've got another revenge game here. Steve Smith Sr. He's about the only play I'm going to trust on the Ravens this week. That running back situation's a mess beer. I can't trust Joe Flacco. The tight end situation with Pitta out, I'm not going near that. What's your take on the Ravens this week?
Love me some Steve Smith Sr. this week.
All the revenge.
Revenge. You saw last week with Deshaun Jackson. Same type of guy. Steve Smith is emotional. He takes this game very seriously. He has a lot of pride in his game. And he knows Carolina made a mistake by letting him go, and he's proven it on the field. The guy's got 290 yards receiving in the first 3 weeks in friggin' Baltimore. Imagine if he was in a high-powered passing offense. So he's still got it, and he's got a lot to prove. So I cannot see him going out and having a bad game. I got to imagine Flacco, the coaching staff, he's in their ear saying, I want the ball, I want the ball, I want the ball. He's going to get the ball. He's being targeted over 10 times a game already as is. I think you're going to see him force-fed the ball. 6,100 on FanDuel is an absolute steal this week. He is one of my favorite plays on the board at any position. 6,100 a steal. So he's definitely, I'm saying it.
Anyone else on this offense you can trust? I mean, I could like Steve Smith, but there's no way I could use Joe Flacco, any of these running backs. I can't use the tight end at all. Any interest in anyone else, or is it all Steve Smith?
It's pretty much Steve Smith. The running back situation, I'd love to say I like Taliaferro. I like him long term. He's a guy I own in a lot of my dynasty leagues. Forset's still there. Pierce may be coming back. Who knows? I don't know what they see in Pierce because I haven't seen it. But clearly they see something. They keep putting him in there. So the running back situation, going to be hard to tell who's going to get the carries there. So a situation to avoid. The tight end situation is going to be by committee. It's not going to just be Owen Daniels. They got Crockett Gilmore there as a guy they like. So that's going to be hard to tell. So pretty much for me, it is Steve Smith. I'm not trusting Flacco, but yeah, I love some Steve Smith this week. So Boggs, are you agreeing, disagreeing? Because you got to look there like.
See, I'm a fan of the revenge game, but unlike a situation like Fitzpatrick's in, I don't really view that as a revenge game. Just because you're going up against your former team doesn't mean anything to me. Steve Smith, obviously, kind of an unceremonious exit from the Carolina Panthers. That's a revenge game, and I'm all over him this week. I completely agree with you.
Let's talk about the Panthers here, Boggs. We got Cam Newton. He's still a little hurt. I'm not sure I can go with against the Ravens on the road. But two guys I have no problem rostering, maybe even three from this game. We'll start at halfback, D'Angelo Williams, with the other two halfbacks out, Tolbert and Jonathan Stewart. He's in line to probably get 15 touches, maybe a little more, especially with Cam hurt. They're going to have the running game with him, not with Cam. And then the receivers, Kelvin Benjamin, Greg Olsen, both those guys are pretty consistent right now. They're the only two targets in this passing game. Do you have anyone that you could play outside those three guys?
No, to be honest with you. And I'm not even really high on D'Angelo Williams this week. He's obviously coming off kind of an injury. He's a little banged up. I think that really the only two options that I'm in love with from this game, I'm going to disagree. I like Cam. I'm not quite as high on Benjamin this week, believe it or not, because he's going up against Jimmy Smith, who's a pretty damn good cornerback. But Greg Olsen, I think that combination right there is, not even a contrarian, but just an under-the-radar, play that with a great matchup. Because you look at this Baltimore team, they've getting beaten through the air pretty big time in the first couple weeks. But again, Carolina, Benjamin's really the only option in terms of receivers. and then you got Olsen, who is a consistent option, moderately priced, who's got a terrific matchup in my opinion. So I'm liking the Cam Newton to Greg Olsen combination. I love Benjamin when he's got a good matchup, but I'm just really not seeing it this week, especially in Baltimore. I'm going to be, like I said, I'm going with Cam Newton and Greg Olsen as my plays.
I'm going to contrarian here you with Calvin Benjamin. And against the tight end, the Ravens are the second best in the league. They're giving up an average of 2.1 fantasy points per game to a tight end. And against receivers, they are where are they up here? Hold on one second. I think they're one of the worst 5 or 6 teams against the receiver. Let me rattle off some of these stat lines receivers have gotten against them. Cincinnati, 14 receptions, 186 yards, and a TD. Pittsburgh, 13 receptions, 134 yards. Cleveland Browns, guys, wide receivers, 16 receptions, 262 yards, and a touchdown. I'm going to be using Calvin Benjamin in a lot of my lineups this week, especially in GPPs. I'm loving him. Not so much Greg Olsen. So that me and Boggs are going to defer a little bit on that.
Just really quickly, they faced Jermaine Gresham,
horrible tight end,
Keith Miller, and I don't even know, did Jordan Cameron even play? Even if so, he wasn't 100%. So I think this is going to be their first test. The numbers don't lie, but again, I don't really think that they've seen a tight end that has at least been the focal point of their offense, at least, given the current matchup. I don't think Cameron, I think he was more of a decoy if he played, but that's sad. We'll see. But
yeah, Olsen also, I will say, he is pretty much the only consistent tight end this year. You pay up for Jimmy Graham. He's been down 2 weeks, up 1. Greg Olsen's been very consistent all 3 weeks. It's him and Benjamin. Those guys are going to be heavily targeted in the passing game. I like Benjamin more than Olsen. I'll be using both of them, though. I just like Benjamin a little bit more this week. Let's move to the next game, guys. Let's see what we got here. We've got the Lions at the Jets. Jets, I can't use a single one. The Lions D is legit. You can't run on them. If Eric Decker's out, this is going to be a long day for Geno Smith.
Yeah, I'm not seeing much here. Lions D, as much as I hate to admit it, I know I got my Lions fans out there in the chat room like give me crap, but they look good. They shut us down. Rodgers couldn't get in a rhythm. So the Jets, again, Geno, he's been all right, but there's already whispers Vic might get on the field more. You cannot run against this Detroit team. So I love the way Chris Ivory runs the ball, but against this front seven, it's going to be tough sledding. Really the only play here and more of a tournament play, especially on DraftKings, would be Jeremy Curley, especially if Decker sits. He's the number 1 option. He's minimum price or close to it over there, and been getting a lot of targets under the radar. So I've been playing pretty well, good connection with Geno. If the Jets are going to do anything, it's going to have to be through the air. He's really the only viable guy that they have. So Curley's really the only guy I can recommend from the Jets this week.
Yeah, in your Thursday lock games, please don't use Eric Decker unless there's some kind of word that he's definitely going to play tomorrow. It's very iffy. I'm going to guess he sits this week, and I do like Curley on Sunday if the news comes out that Decker is out on Sunday. Be real quick on the Lions. They shut down the Packers. This is going to be a team a lot of people are going to target for the passing game. So let me get your take on the Lions offense this week.
You want my take or Boggs?
You're quick. You're a Chris Prince Beer Makers fan. Everyone wants to hear you, man.
Sure. Not about the Lions. I don't like talking Lions. But no, Stafford should be in a good spot this week. The Jets are horrible against the pass. I mean, their cornerbacks they're coming around, but they're in a world of hurt. So Calvin, Stafford, all the usual suspects for Detroit are in play. Golden Tate's price finally came up a little bit, but still in play, a consistent option. I don't know that I trust the running back, so the Jets, pretty good D against the run. Joik Bell's banged up. Reggie Bush seems to be more of a decoy. So for me, Stafford, Calvin, and Tate, the usual suspects.
The only D, the Jets are the best defense in terms of fantasy points allowed against running backs. I think I'm going nowhere near Reggie Bush or Joik Bell this week. Boggs, let's get to you. What's your take on this Detroit offense? Matthew Stafford, Calvin Johnson, they let us down just like Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson last week. Are you going to be going back to the well this week? I have some Golden Tate exposure at $5,500 on FanDuel. He's just too cheap over there.
Yep, I think Stafford, you go right back to him this week, especially since you mentioned the Jets are stout in terms of defending the run, horrible against the pass. Even against a banged up Brandon Marshall, he had the opportunity to have 3 touchdowns last on Monday night. I don't know if you watched that game closely, but either way, Stafford throwing to a healthy Calvin Johnson, obviously kind of let us down last week, but he still had a solid game, and I expect him to find this end zone this week. This game, I won't say it's going to be a blowout because Detroit, we've seen it over the years. They,
I'm with you. The Jets have no chance in this game.
Okay, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying if the Lions, don't show up, it's going to be because it's their own fault. They didn't show up. I just think that they have the ability, as long as that offensive line can keep, the pass rush out of Stafford's face, should have all day to throw to Calvin Johnson. And let's face it, the Jets don't have anyone to cover him. So I think it's Calvin Johnson. I even love Tate this week. Both are in play for me, and I'm loading up on them across the board.
What's your take on the Lions D? They're probably on FanDuel. They're one of the cheapest Ds. They are definitely my go-to cash game play of the week. What's your take on the Lions D?
Oh, yeah. A little confused by the pricing. Again, it's scary, but at the same time, I think the Lions, new head coach, new people, new faces. They're looking to bounce back this year. They're not going to let games get away like they have in the past. So I expect the Giants to be good. Chris Ivory looked good, but that was the Bears, and we mentioned that this Detroit defense can stop the run in addition to get to the quarterback. So there's a lot of turnover potential from Geno Smith, who we saw turned over the ball 2 or 3 times on Monday. I do love the Detroit defense.
And their kicker, guys, it's not Nate Freeze anymore on FanDuel. He got cut.
Screw that guy, man.
They have Alex Henry in there. I'm not sure if he's available over there. But don't use Nate Freeze in your lineups this week. Let's move to the Bucs at Steelers. I am loving the Steelers offense. We saw what Atlanta did to the Bucs. Now I expect Tampa Bay to play a little bit better this week. They're going to be, they just got embarrassed. They're going to come into Pittsburgh and try to play better, but I'm not convinced they have the personnel to keep up. Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Marcus Wheaton. I'm loving some of these Steelers this week here.
Yeah, another team in a great spot this week. Bell, to me, a top 3 running back. Antonio Brown, top 3, top 5 receiver. Very, very consistent. I love him in a cash game. You know what you're going to get. Hasn't had less than 90 yards in a game this year. Always seems to get 5, 6, 7 catches. Plus has that upside. He can score from anywhere on the field. So Brown and Bell, 2 of my favorite plays of the week. Roethlisberger, more of a tournament play, but should be in a good spot. Same with Wheaton. There is some upside there. Not really trusting Heath Miller, but if you're liking this offense, which I am, I guess that makes him a tournament flyer, but I really haven't seen it out of him. They're seeming to want to run the ball with Bell, mix in some Blunt, and target the hell out of Antonio Brown. So Bell and Brown, to me, no-brainers this week. The Pittsburgh D could be sneaky. I know a lot of people will be looking at them, but Tampa looks like a dumpster fire. They're transitioning over to Glennon. There's going to be some turnovers, so Pittsburgh D is in play as well, under 5K on FanDuel.
Yeah, I'm a little bit lower on the Pittsburgh D. Glennon is a huge upgrade over McCown to me. I'm liking Glennon too. It might not be this game. We're going to get to Boggs here in a minute, but he had a pretty good connection with Vincent Jackson last year. I'm expecting Vincent Jackson to kind of pick his play up as the season moves on with Glennon at quarterback. But I'm loving Antonio Brown, the consistency you mentioned, cash game play. He never has less than 5 catches. He never has less than 80, 90 yards. He can always get you a touchdown. He can get you 2. He can get you 150 yards. He can get you a punt return touchdown. Antonio Brown is basically a lock to make most of my cash games this week. And Le'Veon Bell, his vision is crazy. He's dancing up at the line, and then he just goes, and no one can stop him. He's kind of reinvented himself this year. I love Le'Veon Bell and Big Ben, GPP upside. Very sneaky this week. People are going to be going for the Bortles, for the Teddy Bridgewaters. Big Ben could easily have 3 or 4 TDs this game if it all goes to plan. They pass it a lot. Let's get over to Boggs here. The Bucs, Mike Glennon, VJax, any of these guys pique your interest at all? This halfback situation with Doug Martin coming back, he's going to get the shot, but I'm just avoiding all the halfback situation. What's your take on the Bucs?
I think that there's some sneaky value from this team. Perhaps not so much from Glennon, since I can't really trust him. There's a reason why, after starting majority of the games last year, that he was relegated to a bench role this year. They thought McCown was the guy. I'm kind of with you in that I hope Mike Glennon starts, only because you're absolutely right when you say he's always had a good rapport with Vincent Jackson. I love Vincent Jackson's price this week. He's a guy that I'm going to be targeting heavily, especially if Glennon starts. If McCown starts, then it's going to be a dumpster fire. But I'm liking the Glennon to Vincent Jackson. I'm just liking the Vincent Jackson more so than anything. Not going to mess around with Doug Martin. That offensive line is just not as good as I think a lot of people anticipated. And, with Bobby Rainey still probably going to factor into that mix, even after fumbling a couple times back on Thursday. I really think that they're going to figure out that, hey, we need to start using our best weapons more instead of trying to dick around with these running backs with our poor offensive line. So I think that Vincent Jackson's in play. I even like Evans as a GPP play at his suppressed price. But aside from that, I don't really have to have anyone. If you want to pair Glennon with Vincent Jackson, sure, go for it. But kind of going back to his game logs last year, he never really lit it up. It was just more so Vincent Jackson, him targeting him almost exclusively. But the Steelers, who was their number one quarterback last week? Wasn't it Ike Taylor? And didn't he break his arm?
Yeah.
So they didn't get any better in my opinion. And in the secondary, they've always been weak for the last couple of years. So I do like Vincent Jackson. Hopefully Polamalu isn't spying him the whole game. But either way, Jackson and Evans as a GPP play, that's where I'm going in this game.
Yeah, Jackson's always a GPP play. I think he makes a very strong GPP play this week. Stevie mentioned he has a broken bone in his wrist. He's practicing in full. Everyone's expecting to play. If he can practice and catch the balls in practice, I'm not expecting it to hamper him too much in the game. Let's move to the next game in London. Miami at Oakland. What a dumpster fire of a game they get over across the ocean here. Oakland, Beer, I think this is going to make it quick. It's James Jones, and that's it.
My question is, who the hell scheduled this game to
I think
send
the
abroad?
NFL has to pay these guys, pay the owners tens of millions of dollars to get them to go to this game, because it's always the worst of the worst that go to this.
I mean, you think we're going over to London. We want to showcase our game on the world stage. Here is the Oakland Raiders. Who in the hell thought that was a good idea? If you're a Raiders fan, I'm sorry, but I'm not seeing much here. I saw today Maurice Jones-Drew may come back, so that eats into McFadden's value, any that he had. I guess James Jones will be a play with Streeter out, but again, I think you're going to see a whole mix of receivers in there, Holmes and Moore and the rest of the crap they have. Derek Carr's interesting in a tournament, 5,700. The kid's got some moxie, so he's going to go down fighting. So if they get down, he's going to throw the ball. I could see him putting up some numbers for a desperate tournament play. I don't mind Carr down there. I'd rather have him than a Bortles or a Bridgewater this week. I don't think anybody's going to be on Carr. So a 1%er that could put up some numbers down in garbage time. Carr to Jones, but yeah,
That's
these
about
poor
it.
people in England got to watch this crap. I feel sorry for them.
Yeah, Oakland is just pretty much all off my radar. Maybe deep GPP plays if you got a ton of entries, guys. Maybe kind of load one in with an Oakland stack maybe, but I certainly won't be doing it.
I wouldn't do the stack. Pump the brakes there. Maybe a Carr to Jones, but I wouldn't be stacking up Oakland.
Yeah, Miami Boggs, let's get to them. We had Miller last week, Lamar Miller. He came back. His price has gone up. He had a big game with him being the only viable running back. They did sign Daniel Thomas. Again, they never seem to, they always love themselves some Daniel Thomas in Miami. I'm expecting Lamar Miller to run all over this Oakland defense, who is just horrible against the run. Tannehill, there's some going-ons with his coach. Is he going to start? Is he not going to start? I'm not going to have any exposure to Tannehill with all this stuff going on. If he has a bad first half, maybe they pull him for Matt Moore or something like that. I'm not going anywhere near Tannehill this week. It's all about Lamar Miller for me.
Yeah, really quickly before I get to Miami, you guys talk about scheduling. I just feel bad for the Raiders. I mean, they started week one, they had to fly all the way to New York, play the Jets, not an easy matchup. And they got to go all the way home for their first home game against Houston. And then they got to go all the way back to New England, and then they got to go to London.
I think I saw something where they fly more. They travel more than 2 or 3 times the next most team this year.
Yeah, and I guess I don't really feel too bad because I hate the Raiders, but I feel bad for Carr because I am a fan of the kid, and I think Beers is absolutely right. The kid is, he's a gamer, but it's just a tough start for him. The team sucks. There's no consistency at any position. But I will say, if anyone in England loves, is going to love anyone on Oakland, it's going to be Janikowski. I think he's going to go off this week. I'm not kidding. They love the kickers. They love soccer out there in England. So I like Janikowski this week, big time.
They're going to feed the kicker. They're going to purposely not score touchdowns. So
well, he's the only guy that can consistently score.
They can kick the football through the goalposts.
He'll be a hit in the bar scene, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's hopefully he doesn't hop into a double-decker bus after that and start driving that around town. But either way, Miami, I'm right there with you. I'm not taking a shot on Tannehill. I've never really been a big fan of him. This is a guy that was a wide receiver in college up until his senior year and was really only drafted back when Mike Sherman was the offensive coordinator. I know Beers knows him well, but I've never been a big fan of Tannehill. Never thought he would be able to sustain a long NFL career. Starting to see it right now. Can't learn a new offense. Completely off Tannehill. That being said, Lamar Miller is probably among my top three, maybe easily my top five running backs this week. Obviously had a pretty good game last week. Tallied 100 yards on 15 carries and was involved in the passing game with no Sean Moreno out. I am all over Lamar Miller, and I think he's one of your safer cash game plays at his moderate price. That's about all I'm going to be targeting. Miami defense, it's intriguing, but again, Carr, he's shown the ability to scramble a bit and avoid pressure. And flying all the way out there to England, I think that both teams in general are going to be a little sluggish, getting used to jet lag and everything. So this is just not a game I love aside from Lamar Miller. He's the only guy, aside from Janikowski, that I'm going to be playing in this game.
What about Mike Wallace at all? He's had a couple good weeks in a row to start the season, been somewhat consistent for a guy that's supposedly boom or bust, and it's very hard. He's got a moderate price, and there's been a lot of receivers that have done well one week and been horrible two. Any interest in Mike Wallace, even with the Tannehill situation?
I don't hate it. I haven't really seen too many deep balls. Isn't that what his game is kind of involved around? His speed, being able to go deep. I know he's the number one receiver, and he has been very consistent. He's averaging 10 targets a game. I'm a little hesitant on him this week, especially since if I'm not mistaken, his price has kind of come up from what we've seen. So he's not a guy I have to have, certainly in play in GPPs, because anyone can go off against Oakland. I'm just so high on Lamar Miller this week that's the route I'm going to be taking.
Let me ask you a question about Lamar Miller, and we're going to get to beer in a second here. Lamar Miller or Donald Brown? Because I know you love some Donald Brown.
Lamar Miller.
All right, so
yeah. To answer, Donald Brown, I was on Woodhead a little bit more up until I started making my lineups last week, and Donald Brown, just at his price, seemed too good to pass up. But he didn't have a very good game, and he's never really been that guy that's ever really carried an entire load. I think I was watching the show with Dan and Tip and Pick, and they said that he's never even had more than 19 carries before last game, and he had 30. And only averaged 2 yards a carry, so I'm going with Lamar Miller.
36 touches last week.
Yeah, I'm going with Lamar Miller every day.
All right. Beer, let me pose the same question to you. Lamar Miller or Donald Brown, because we're now on the Chargers game.
Love them both, but I'm disagreeing. I'm going Brown. I love Lamar Miller this week. Probably a top 6-7 running back for me. Brown's the last man standing, so what he's done in the past, whatever. He averaged 5 yards a carry last season. So if people are down on him because he only got 2 yards a carry, keep in mind that was against a good Buffalo run defense. So now he gets Jacksonville, who's the worst defense against the run. So
let me interject here and let me spout these stats off on just how bad Jacksonville is. In the first week against Philadelphia, 32 attempts, 145 yards, and a touchdown. Against Washington, week 2, 38 rushing attempts, 151 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Against Indianapolis, 24 rushing attempts, 123 yards, far and away the worst, far and away giving up the most fantasy points to halfbacks this year.
Yeah, so there you go. There's nobody left. There's Oliver behind him who's going to get a handful of touches, but the way I see this game going, San Diego should have no problems with this team. They're going to get a lead. They're going to run the ball a lot. He's the guy going to get the ball. He's going to catch some catches. Dirt cheap salary. So I just love the price, love the matchup for him. He's one of my top plays at running back. Have him slightly over Lamar Miller, but right now those are my two cash game running backs, so I love them both. Rivers is in play, obviously. I think almost all the Chargers are. The receivers are tough to predict. Who's it going to be? So more of GPPs on Allen. If you wanted to go Arroyo, you're believing that hype.
Beer, let me interject you again. Not only is Jacksonville the worst against halfbacks, they're also the worst against quarterbacks, giving up 322 yards and 2 TDs week 1, 288 yards and 2 TDs week 3, and 390 yards and 4 TDs to Andrew Luck. Phillip Rivers is definitely in play. Jacksonville is just horrible.
All right, yeah. Brown, Rivers, two of my favorite plays. I think Gates gets back on track this week. Good to see Ladarius Green get mixed in. Even if they get a lead and they take out their starters, I think Green will stay on the field. So I think there's some good value in him at 5,000. So Boggs knows Chargers are in a great spot this week, and I do love me some Donald Brown this week. Very high on him.
Boggs, let's move. Any thoughts on your Chargers?
I'm going to disagree with you guys. I'm a little scared about this game, and maybe that's just because, hey, listen to me. Maybe it's just because I'm, kind of a cynical Chargers fan, and I've endured many, many, many years of, heartbreak. But I think this game's going to be a shootout. I really do, and so for that reason, I'm not really on Brown. I love Rivers. I love Gates. I love Keenan Allen. Even love Malcolm Floyd, who I was all over last week. But I think I would be a little hesitant to use this defense in this game, especially since Bortles is a guy that can hang in there. He knows he can throw the ball, and whenever you're ready to transition into my take on Jacksonville, I think that I think the Chargers will win this game, but I don't think it's going to be an absolute blowout like we saw last week. I just think that there's some holes defensively for San Diego that Bortles can exploit moving into this game. So I'm a little hesitant.
Let's talk about the Jags then, maybe why you're hesitant, because Blake Bortles is now starting. He looks so much better than Chad Henne in the preseason. He looked better. He was tossing it all over the field last game. He's a huge upgrade at quarterback from Chad Henne. He's got Cecil Shorts. He's got Allen Robinson. I think both those guys as receivers are in play. If you're expecting this game to be a shootout, Blake Bortles on most sites, he's very low priced. On draft day, he's minimum price. FanDuel, he's $6,500. DraftKings, he's cheap. You got to love some of these Jags plays as cheap GPP plays.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. I can't trust any of these guys in my cash games. I know Cecil Shorts used to be cash money last year, but now that they have a few more options and the fact that he's still in his second game since coming off injury, it's a GPP only play for me. But I think there's potential here, and I'm not just saying that because I have to talk about Jacksonville, but I really do think that Bortles is going to be the focal point moving forward. And I think they're just going to let him go out and have some fun. So I can see this game turning into a shootout. My money's on the over, but either way, they'll be playing from behind. If you expect San Diego to really go out and stomp them, then they're still going to be playing from behind. And I know that they brought in Bortles early last game, but he still, came in. What did he play? 3 quarters? Still threw for 223 yards.
Halftime, yeah.
Yeah,
so, at halftime he did that.
Oh, it's halftime. Okay, so yeah, I'm not saying you can double that production automatically, but you can beat San Diego through the air. I think that they're a little bit overrated in terms of their secondary, but I can't tell you which receiver is going to go off, especially if Allen Hurns plays. But I do think that taking a Cecil Shorts or an Allen Robinson in a GPP is an interesting strategy this week.
Yeah, Shorts and Robinson, they saw almost every snap playing 2 wide receivers. Hurns comes in on 3 wide receivers. Lee's going to be out again. It's going to be those 3 guys. Allen Robinson is kind of the guy I want to target. He's a little bit cheaper. I think he can have just as big a day as Shorts. They both had a bunch of targets last week. For GPPs, Bortles with one of these guys, or maybe even both if you're expecting them to get behind, I don't mind it, guys. In cash games, I think it's just a little too risky. We're going to get into some real juicy games coming up here in a second right now, so we're going to want to focus a lot of your players on. That brings us to the Eagles at Niners. In beer, Colin Kaepernick, Michael Crabtree. It's looking like Vernon Davis is going to play. He's getting in full practices. I think you can just lock all three of those guys in for some pretty decent days this week against Philadelphia.
Yeah, I like all three of them. Very, very high in Kaepernick. I know a lot of people are down on him, questioning if he's going to be the man in San Francisco. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about Week 4, and they're playing Philadelphia. You know Philadelphia's going to come in there and put up points. San Francisco has the ability to match them and go blow for blow with them. So Kaepernick's starting to run more. We're starting to see more of that, so that only adds to his stat line. So I do like him a whole lot this week. Vernon Davis, a depressed price, coming off an injury. I don't think a lot of people will be on him. Could be a very, very sneaky GPP option, so don't write him off just yet. A guy with tremendous athleticism and a nose for the end zone. So I like him in this matchup. And you mentioned Crabtree. That's Kaepernick's go-to guy. So against Philly, everybody's in play. We saw it with Washington last week. Garcon had a big week. Jackson had a big week. Paul. So there's plenty of production to go around. The running game is the question, one that I'm going to stay away from. I think you're going to slowly see the transition from Gore to Hyde. I think it's going to start this week. It's going to be more of an even split. I know there's people expecting a Gore bounce back. I'm staying away, to be honest. I know Philadelphia's the team you want to target against, but I don't trust that either of these guys is going to do enough to be a viable option in your lineup. So staying away from them this week.
Yeah, the fact that the run game is struggling has me even higher on Kaepernick. You saw him unleashed last week. He's starting to run a little bit more. That creates even more points for Kaepernick. He's one of my top quarterbacks of the week. Colin Kaepernick is going to be in a lot of my lineups, along with Michael Crabtree. As long as Vernon Davis doesn't have a setback, is at a press price at tight end. Love me some Vernon Davis, too. All three of those guys are going to be heavily involved in my lineups. Boggs, let's get to this Eagles team. And I'm having real trouble trying to pinpoint anyone in this game that I really want to play. So I want to get your advice. I want to go back to beer afterwards. I don't know what to make of this Eagles offense other than someone's going to put up a lot of points, and I just don't know who this week.
Well, I think anytime you see LaShawn McCoy hovering around 7K on DraftKings, you can safely lock him in to your cash game lineups. That's just simply too low of a price. Obviously, terrible game last game, but that's because he got hurt. And as long as he's in this lineup and he's healthy, which he came back and returned in that game, I know it wasn't a great game, but I think he's going to start to become more involved. He's just too great of a talent to be used the way he has been early on in this season. So I think that this game actually might not have the fireworks we're all anticipating. I think both teams are going to come out and try and run the ball and establish the run. I think San Francisco, instead of not having success for the run, like you mentioned, I think that was more of their game plan last week against the Cardinals. I think that it obviously didn't work, but I think they tried to do something new than going with the norm, which is establish that running game. So I would disagree with both of you. I'm loving Frank Gore this week. It's not just based on his price, but I just don't see this game having the fireworks that it's meant. It's kind of.
Do you think there could be kind of? You think maybe like the Colts did against the Eagles? They try to just ground and pound the clock away.
Well, the Colts try to change their game plan around from getting the ball out of Luck's hands and giving it to the running game, and we didn't really we never really saw that coming because we didn't have any faith in the Colts running game, but. You got a San Francisco team that you can bet your ass they're going to go right back to it this week, because that's the name of their game: run the ball, control the clock, and especially if they want to keep this Philly team off of the field, their offense. That's what they're going to have to do. So I know it sucks that Frank Gore has been inconsistent in terms of getting carries, especially in the goal line, and Carlos Hyde is eventually going to be that guy. But I like Frank Gore a little bit this week. But getting to Philly, I do love McCoy, and they're still gonna get there. They're still gonna get the ball, and they're gonna be doing what they normally do. And with a San Francisco team that's been surprisingly good on defense, even with the numerous injuries and key losses that they've had, Just kind of goes to show it's a testament to Harbaugh and the way he's able to coach up players and use them in the right spots. But regardless, I think that maybe not so much in your cash games, loading up a Macklin and a Foles, but I think there's potential there. I'm just liking the running backs from this game a little bit more than I do the receivers. So that's the route I'm going to go. That being said, Zach Ertz, his price has come back down. I do like him again this week. I'm going to like him every week because of the talent he possesses. But for me, Macklin, with his price tag going up, I don't have to have him, despite the fact he's been targeted heavily in the early part of this season, and he's been targeted deep. It's more of a GPP play for me, but again, I'm sticking with McCoy, I'm sticking with Gore, and that's the route I'm going with this game this week.
I do like Macklin. After just bringing up some of these stats a little bit more, the Niners are giving up the second most fantasy points to wide receivers this year. So that's not going to shy me away from Macklin, even at the higher price there. Real quick, Beer, on the Eagles. It's going to be a game a lot of people are targeting. Give me your input on them.
I'm liking Nick Foles. I don't think a lot of people are going to run out and go to Nick Foles this week. When you got Andrew Luck, you got Drew Brees, you got some other quarterbacks that have some prime matchups. People still see San Francisco as an elite defense. They are, but right now they're banged up. So I love McCoy's price on DraftKings, but I think Philadelphia is going to attack through the air. We know that. Foles is going to get his numbers. He's going to get his 300 yards. Macklin, I love him, but the price, like Bog said, really jumped up. So I think he's a bit too highly priced. You saw Matthews come on last week, so it's hard to predict the targets. I like Ertz. As Bog said, I agree there. His price came down. I think people will be off the Ertz train as well. So maybe a Foles-Ertz combo. McCoy on DraftKings again, just too cheap. My top running back on DraftKings at that price, it's just too low. I know San Francisco's pretty good run D, but he's going to get back on track. Chip Kelly knows he's the focal point of this offense. He's going to get him the rock. So don't sleep on Nick Foles this week.
On FanDuel, because of Macklin's increased price, I think I'm going to be deploying at least one or two GPP stacks of Foles Macklin. People are going to be spending up to Calvin Johnson, to Antonio Brown. And with how bad the Niners defense has been against wide receivers, not too many people are going to be on Macklin. They were used to being 6,000, not 8,000. I think makes for a sneaky pay up in a GPP. Instead of paying down for value, you pay up for guys that are just a little bit below some of these top tier guys. I'd much rather have a Antonio Brown than Jeremy Macklin, especially with the price increase. But I think Macklin makes a pretty good target this week. Let's move to the Falcons at Minnesota. We got Teddy Bridgewater, Beer, Matt Asiata, Greg Jennings, Cordero Patterson. Everyone's in play for the Vikings, right? This is sarcasm.
Yeah, I'm catching your sarcasm there. I mean, I think they're tournament plays. I think Minnesota could surprise, could put up some points. Atlanta's a better team on the road, or at home, I mean. So in a dome, or I guess it's not in a dome. I'm all mixed up here with the new Minnesota Stadium situation, but I think they can hang. So I'm not as high. I'd rather have a Bortles. I'd rather have a Carr than Bridgewater this week. Patterson is always a GPP play, brings huge upside to the table. Jennings, I suppose, is a cheap option, but I'm not as high on him. In the running game, Asiata is just a guy. He's going to have some big weeks, but basically he's a fullback. So tough to roster him at his price right now. When he was minimum salary, okay, throw him in there. But now I think they priced him up too high. So basically Patterson in a GPP, but I do think the Vikings can hang in this game.
I actually like Greg Jennings in GPPs. He got targeted 7 times by Teddy in the short time he was in there. I think Jennings is probably going to be the guy he's going to look to. Teddy's going to try to get the ball out of his hands quick. So you're going to see some screens to Patterson and some short passes to Jennings, I think. And then also with Teddy Bridgewater, he is going to run a little bit too, so he gives you a little bit higher of a floor than maybe a Carr or even a Blake Bortles if he just has a horrible day in San Diego. Because he's probably going to get 40, 50 yards on the ground. He's going to tuck it and run instead of going through 3 or 4 looks. So I don't mind Teddy Bridgewater in a GPP, but I actually like Jennings over Patterson. Does that make any sense to you, Beer?
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard to predict which receiver, but Bridgewater coming in, he may have eyes for Jennings. I think Jennings will be more consistent, but Patterson, again, the upside is there.
Boggs, let's get to the Falcons here. I am not expecting them to put up 8,000 points like they did against the Buccaneers at home. But I do like some Matty Ice, some Julio Jones. You can never go wrong with Julio Jones. He's one of the top receivers in the game. The running back situations to be avoided. So basically it boils down to what's your take on Matty Ice and Julio and Roddy White?
Just really quickly, I do like Patterson in his GPP play, and I think in terms of Minnesota, I think this is the week Jerick McKinnon breaks out. Minimum price, great GPP play in my opinion, because Atlanta, they can't rush the passer. That's the reason, the only thing he's been struggling with. We all know Jerick McKinnon's talents as a running back. He just hasn't been able to effectively, pass block. But with Atlanta not really having a great pass rush, I think McKinnon's going to get a look, even as I expect, or especially as I expect Atlanta to come back and roar back again this week and really roll over this and expose this Minnesota defense for the first time this season. So don't sleep on McKinnon. I expect him to get a lot more involved in the offense this week, especially now that they lost Rudolph. They're just going to really try and run the ball. I think Teddy Bridgewater's screwed basically this week. But going to Atlanta, I'm back on them again this week. I was all over them last week. I said they were going to come home, blow out Tampa Bay, and that was an understatement. What they did on last Thursday. So they've had plenty of time to rest. I know they're going outdoors. Usually we remember Minnesota in the Hubert Humphrey Metrodome as being an indoor place, but they're playing University of Minnesota Stadium until that new stadium gets built, so they're outdoors. That being said, I still like Matty Ice. I still love Julio Jones, and I'm not quite sure what to make of Roddy White. If he kind of plays that decoy role, he still had 5 catches last game, but I think that was just kind of obligatory getting him the ball. So I'm all over Julio Jones again this week, all over Matty Ice. Even don't hate Steven Jackson at his price as a kind of speculative GPP play. I know he's going to give up some carries, but he looked good when he ran the ball last week. So I don't hate that. I'm loving Atlanta to keep continuing this role, and I think that they're going to put up some more points again this week.
Chat's calling you out, Boggs, to all your Aces swag that you're rocking. They want some, and I believe you have a package for me sitting there that you've got to mail to me. Because I'm thinking I got a shirt and a hat coming my way from you. So I'm waiting for that. I love fantasy swag. Let's move to Saints at Cowboys. This is going to be one of the most heavily targeted games of the week. Beer, I think everyone from both sides of the ball is pretty much in play. We're going to talk about the Cowboys here. Tony Romo, DeMarco Murray, Dez Bryant. Those are the 3 guys I'm targeting. Some Terrence Williams. I'm not going anywhere near Jason Witten. I think he's almost done with an NFL career, but the other guys I'm loving. What's your take on the Cowboys?
Yeah, Dez, no-brainer. Top 3 wide receiver. We know that every week, week in, week out, matchup proof. DeMarco Murray, to me, it's been Murray and Bell as the 2 best running backs in the league. So keep plugging those guys in. Until Murray gets hurt, keep riding the train. Romo's the interesting case here. I know a lot of people have soured on Romo. Dallas has transformed into a ground-and-pound team, giving Murray the ball 30 times a game. Romo's a guy much better at home. 327 yards a game over the last 2 seasons at home. His fantasy point average is about 5 to 6 points higher a game at home. I think they're going to need him to pull one of them huge games out of his backside that we've seen in the past. We saw last year when the chips are down and they need him, he'll step up and perform. He put up a huge number against Denver in that shootout last year. This game could go down that route with a lot of points. I don't know it'll be as high scoring as people expect, as I think Dallas is going to try to take the air out of the ball. But I think the Saints are going to find their way. It's going to force Romo to throw the ball. I think he makes for a great tournament play this week at a depressed salary. So, again, don't sleep on Romo, one of my favorite tournament plays of the week.
Boggs, let's get to the Saints here. I have a guy who's going to be in just about every single lineup I make this week. Is Jimmy Graham. He's easily my top skill position player. I got to have him in my lineups this week. Why don't you talk about him, and I'm going to interject you in a minute once I pull up some stats on how bad the Cowboys are against tight ends.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you, so I don't think that will be necessary. But I will say that as disappointing as, Breeze pretty much just basically hitting what we would expect his floor to be last week, and Jimmy Graham not finding
Beer lied to
momentum.
us. He said his floor was 350 yards and 3 TDs. I was right there with him. So, Beer, stop lying to me. I want to hear on the floor. I want to hear 250 and 2 TDs.
Well,
It's
hey,
sad when he gets 293 and 2, and you're like, oh, that's it.
listen. I think that might have been the biggest blessing in disguise for us DFS players last week. And just let me reiterate it, or let me explain why. Obviously we were on Breeze last week at home in the Dome. We loved it. Everyone was on it. I mean, let's be honest. Everyone was on Breeze Graham, and I made I thought a savvy, cool decision of fading Graham for Calvin and Jordy in addition to Breeze. That didn't pay off either. But the bottom line is, a lot of people got burned by it. I don't think a lot of people have the balls to go back with it. And if you thought the matchup last week was good, the matchup this week's even better.
Let me tell you how good it is.
There you go.
So the Cowboys have given up 4 touchdowns, 288 yards, and let me check my math here, 27 receptions to tight ends this year. Easily the most fantasy points allowed to tight ends this year. I mean, Jared Cook, who's that other guy last week for the Rams that had a touchdown? Austin Davis, he just threw for 327 yards against the Cowboys. I'm all over Jimmy Graham this week.
Yeah, I'm all over Breeze too. And in addition to those two guys, I think you're starting to really see Brandon Cooks solidify a role in this offense. And he's a guy that is a stud, has been a stud, and I think will continue putting up studly numbers for the remainder of the season. I'll say that I can't trust Colston anymore, despite his very attractive $4,800 price and I believe $5,500 on FanDuel. It's GPP play, sure, but I'm not going that route in cash games. I can't trust the guy anymore. I love all those guys, and I even think that kind of going back to maybe a Kerry Robinson this week is something that you might want to consider in GPP because, I mean, yeah, he had a mediocre game, didn't find the end zone, but he still got 18 carries, and you're going to see him get that many carries moving forward. So I'm loving everyone on this New Orleans offense. I am doubling down. Breeze is my top quarterback this week. Jimmy Graham, as he will probably be every week if he's healthy, my top tight end, but I'm expecting them to really figure it out, especially considering didn't Sean Payton used to coach for the Cowboys back in the day. He's got a little extra motivation. If I'm not mistaken, the Saints always show up when they play the Cowboys, but either way, they need to get things going back, to the way that they're used to seeing things on offense. And going into Dallas, which is essentially a dome, I think Breeze can find himself having a good game. It's not a typical road game for Breeze like it would be if he were going to Green Bay.
Yep. Yeah, I love Breeze. Jimmy, I like Cooks over Colston. I'm kind of done with Colston. I think Cooks has clearly overtaken him in this little short passing game. The Saints seem to have adapted. They're loving some Brandon Cooks. And Kerry Robinson, again, $4,900 on FanDuel. It's just too cheap. You pair him with Donald Brown, and you can pretty much have your pick of the litter at just about every other position, and that's kind of where I'm going. Beer, real quick on the Saints. What's your take on them? Another game everyone's going to be targeting.
Pretty much echo everything Boggs said. I love Breeze this week. My number one quarterback, Graham's a given. I love Cooks. Don't sleep on Pierre Thomas, people. I talked about this last week. We talked about it on the Sirius radio show on Saturday nights. Everyone's Kerry. That's great. He gets more carries, but Pierre Thomas is involved, passing game-wise, goal line. He's going to get his touches too. And on DraftKings, the differential in price between the two is not so great that I'd roster Kerry over Pierre. So FanDuel,
I agree.
Sure, Robinson's the play, but on DraftKings, I think Pierre is a much better play over Kerry Robinson. So just don't forget Pierre Thomas. He has a lot of value in that offense.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Let's move to the most exciting Monday night game in history, the Patriots at Kansas City. It's our final game of the night. The Chiefs here, it's looking like Jamal Charles might get in there. It's kind of hard to tell right now. If he's out, obviously Niall Davis, he's not Niles Davis. Niall Davis is a top play. And Kelsey got about 65% of the snaps last week, up from about 35% in weeks 1 and 2. I know Beer loves Kelsey. It's very nice to see him getting more snaps. I think that's going to turn into more production.
That's it, Kelsey. Good night, people.
Yeah, there's not much else here, guys. So
it's going to be tough on a FanDuel to roster Davis or Charles. You're not going to know on Sunday morning what their status is going to be for Monday night. So if you're on DraftKings and you want to roll the dice, make sure, listen closely, you put them in the flex position to give yourself options. I mean, obviously you could switch from one to the other, but flex, you at least have some options. You could switch to some Patriots if need be. But on FanDuel, to me, Kansas City, it's Kelsey. I don't trust any of the receivers. The defense is definitely not what it was last year. Alex Smith, nothing more than a long shot tournament play, has been putting up some okay numbers, but give me all the Kelsey. Still underpriced. They jacked him up a little bit. He's the best receiver they have on that team. So I think he's in for a big game. Get him in your rosters. But other than that, that's it. Kelsey.
Patriots. Patriots used to be a superpower. Used to be able to pick just about anyone on their team. And outside of Julian Edelman and maybe some Gronkowski, there's really no one I can be comfortably rostering this week. In Kansas City, one of the toughest places to play is a road team. Any interest in some of these Patriots outside of those two guys, Boggs?
Can I really quickly talk about Niall Davis?
No, absolutely not.
Really quick. I'm kidding, but I read an interesting article on Pro Football Focus today, and you guys know I'm not really that big of a stats guy, sabermetric, especially with football, but they really kind of laid out that Niall Davis really had a shitty week last week. Aside from one huge run, he was terrible in about every other way you can evaluate a running back. So even if Charles is out, I'm not playing Niall Davis. And I wasn't really high on him last week. I know he got the touchdown and 132 yards, but he had 2 fumbles. He's terrible in pass coverage. Didn't even get 1 reception, which was alarming to me. So be careful about Niall Davis if you're planning on rostering him. But I do want agree with Beermakers fans. Finally, after 3 weeks, they finally start getting Kelsey the ball. I think you're going to see him ultimately, go into this role in which he's going to be the top tight end. So don't sleep on him, especially since his price is really kind of yet to reflect his potential. So I do love Kelsey. That's it from the Chiefs. As for the New England, these guys are just as bad as Kansas City. I mean, give me a break. For years, Belichick, trying to play his mind games on everyone. He, was able to get away with it because he actually had talent. Now he's got nothing. When, Damian Amendola is your best receiver outside of Julian Edelman, and you're still not playing Gronk every down, you're gonna struggle. So I think this is going to be one of the most boring games you'll see all year long. I will say that Edelman is about as money as Antonio Brown is in terms of being a cash game receiver, especially on a full PPR site. But I still can't trust Gronk in my cash games. I know he's starting to see more snaps, but I'm not playing Gronk over Jimmy Graham this week, and especially on a site, say like DraftKings where it's full PPR. I think that Gronk has his most value over on a site like FanDuel where yardage and touchdowns are a little bit more valued. But still, I can't trust him yet in my cash games. And believe me, I'm the biggest Gronk fan in the world coming from University of Arizona. But I'm not going to try and figure out which running back is going to have any success. I think Kansas City can stop the run. I want to say Brady is going to figure it out this week. But again, it's not them being cute and playing mind games anymore. It's not working because there's no talent in that offense. And the offensive line sucks. So I really think you're going to see the Patriots kind of come back down to earth this year. And surprising because, I thought they'd run away with that division.
I'm not. You're right on Rob Gronk. He's only playing maybe 50-60% of the snaps. He's big in the red zone, but I'm still not going to pay for him. I'm going to pay up to get a Jimmy Graham, or I'm going to pay down for one of the really cheap guys. Outside of Edelman, especially on PPR sites, there's no one else on this Patriots team. Trying to pick a running back and build Bill Belichick's running back situation is just impossible. Stephen Ridley, Shane Vereen, Bolden gets a couple carries. I have no interest in that. It's only about Julian Edelman for me. And even that, I think there might be some better prices, better players for the prices out there. That about wraps it up for the first look here, guys. We've got 4 more hours of Roto Grinder shows here. There's one tomorrow. There's one tomorrow. That's Thursday before the games. There's one Friday, and I think there's 2 on Sunday, guys. So 4 more hours of shows. Pay attention to injuries. Beer Boggs, anything you guys want to say before we head on out of here?
Nope,
No,
just
good show again. Great talking to you guys, and good luck.
yeah. Hopefully, we start to see a little bit more consistency now that we've got 3 weeks under our belts here. But either way, good luck, grinders. Stay tuned to all the shows. You're going to get a variety of different strategies, different ways people look at it, at the game of football, and it's really going to help you as a player moving forward. So don't just tune into one show each and every week. Make sure you guys check everything out. But other than that, good luck.
Yeah, you make a real quick point. With 3 weeks of data in the NFL, that's actually quite a bit of data. I was reading an article somewhere today. If you take the first 3 weeks, it's pretty indicative of the rest of the season when you compare it to using last year's data, guys. So don't use last year's data. You're pretty much going to be looking at this year's data from now on, guys, when you're looking at NFL. For my co-hosts, Paul Bogslade Arrington and Chris Beermakers Fan Prince, guys, I'm Britt Devine. Thanks for watching. Real quick congrats again to Bogslade on his new job at Fantasy Aces. Thanks for watching, guys, and we're out of here.